How smart is Windows 11's new AI Copilot?
And what's new with Apple's macOS Sonoma? Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Uniden Australia.
Hi there. Welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the award-winning tech podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading tech journalists to dive into the big tech stories of the week. I'm Alex Kidman, joined, as usual, by Adam Turner. Hey Adam, Facebook this week announced its new Meta gear this week, including new Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses with inbuilt Meta AI and live streaming video built in.
Oof.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how keen are you to strap an all-new pair of Zuckerberg glasses to your
Is
face?
there something less than one? Look, to be honest, I think I've got enough voices in my head without Meta AI whispering in my ear.
Burn all the things, Adam.
Yes, exactly.
Burn all the things. Speaking of hearing voices, we're also joined by Pickr editor Leigh Stark. Leigh, welcome back to the show.
Huh, who said that?
That was me, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, cool.
Are you keen, Leigh, to slap on a pair of Meta second-gen Ray-Bans?
More keen than Adam, I guess. I would not be hard at this point. I liked the last ones, but I'll tell you the weirdest thing about wearing them is knowing that you're wearing them at night on the train to try and listen to your music. You look like the Blues Brothers, only you're not on a mission from God. So I'm kind of excited to be on a mission from God.
There's a Corey Hart song that applies there, and that's a very, very old reference. But this week, we're not talking about old references. We're talking about new software, because something kind of unusual happened this week. I'm fairly sure this is the first time this has ever happened in technology, because usually when we get a new OS upgrade, a new major OS upgrade, it dominates the news cycle for that week because it's the only new major OS upgrade. But this week, we've got two, and not only do we have two, they both landed on the same day. Microsoft released a new version of Windows 11 with a very ugly code name, and Apple released macOS Sonoma. We'll get into Microsoft directly, but first, Leigh, what's worth getting excited about in the macOS side of the fence?
Well, like a lot of things in the macOS world and the Apple world, it's kind of very much about marrying the look and feel of iOS, I guess, with that of Mac. That's a lot of what you're getting in this update. You get a new screensaver and login wallpaper sort of system that feels like a cross between those fancy new home screens on an iPhone and the iPad. You get widgets again.
Well, hang on, the screensavers, they don't feel like that to me. They feel like I've just plugged in an Apple TV. They're that scrolling over a landscape business.
Yeah, but the login screen has that clock in the in the iOS way at the moment, and I get the same sort of feeling that I've got an iPhone or a giant iPad with a massive wallpaper. You're right, it's an Apple TV, and it's the entire Apple TV list. That's actually quite cool. You can actually go into the wallpaper settings, the screensaver settings, and find the entire wallpaper list and screensaver list from Apple TV. But for me, it's even things like that login screen. It does feel like you're now logging into a very large iPad on your computer, which I kind of like, but I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's because I always wanted my iPad to do more. We've had this discussion before. I wanted my iPad to do Final Cut Pro. It does kind of now. And I wanted my iPad to do Xcode, and weirdly, it doesn't do that at all. And now I've kind of got a MacBook that looks like an iPad and can do all those things, but I just can't touch the screen. So you get that. You've got
the thing that bothers me, just to interrupt you again, the thing that bothers me with those screensavers, though, is I like having a screensaver. I like not having screen burn in because that's generally regarded to be a bad thing. But on an Apple TV where it's plugged into my TV, it's all plugged into the wall, not a problem. On a laptop where I'm out and about, perhaps, but I have to leave it there because I'm talking to someone and my screensaver kicks in, that's going to chew through a lot more battery, isn't it?
Yeah, you are not wrong. I'm going to probably add 2 points here. One is that these new MacBooks have between 15 and 18 hours of battery life, provided you're not using high-intensive programs. So something's got to chew through it. If it's not the screensaver, I don't know what it's going to be. But more importantly, screensavers are only supposed to be there as sort of like a temporary measure. Set the power settings so that your screen actually turns off. That would save a lot more power than running the screensaver either way. That would be the solution for me.
You're relying on me being far more intelligent than I actually am.
Oh, just economically careful when it comes to your battery life. I mean, I know as reviewers, we don't actually have to do that. It's our job to flex everything and see how far they can actually go. But, every so often it'd be nice to save a little bit of power somewhere. That's one of the things. It does feel still like it's got the iOS stuff in it because it's got widgets, which feels like something that Windows tried many, many moons ago, and now Apple's doing as well. And this is one feature I'm not quite on board with yet.
This goes back to Tiger, though. This goes back to 2005. I felt like I was in the time machine when they said widgets. Are we really excited about widgets? Which used to suck through your battery, which was one reason why I turned the bastards off.
Look, I'm not excited about widgets on my computer simply because I don't even use them on my phone. To be completely honest, I barely use them there. I know that you can swipe over them. I just don't use them. I get that they're micro applications and they can be good. And you know what? I've even tried programming a few, but I don't. I try to keep my desktop clear. Actually, no, that's a total lie. I can't even see my desktop.
This is the point I was going to make.
Yeah.
Who's actually looking at their desktop?
Exactly.
That doesn't have a
That's what I
dozen
was
different
thinking.
application
That's it.
windows open.
I can't see my desktop. It's I've got browsers or I've got software open, and the times that that's not the case, I start up, and that's it. So I'm not super excited about widgets. I can't like. I know there are people out there that actually do like having a clear desktop. I get it, but I have 476,235 unread messages. I'm not that person.
But also,
I wondered why
on
you
a
hadn't
Mac,
responded to my email, Lee, but now I understand.
you just click on the
not 'cause I
notification
don't like
center
you.
at the top right, and you can call up those widgets straight away without having
Absolutely.
to go to the desktop and move the thing that you're working on. So widgets are already there when you need them.
Yeah. I was going to say the thing that I actually kind of like as an addition is that they've kind of integrated the video chat thing, probably a couple of years too late, as in a really interesting capacity in the new operating system, which is that now when we're on a video chat, we're on one right now, recording vertical hold. You get the little green video camera box. You don't have to be on FaceTime for this at the top of the screen, and you can then change your lighting. You can change sort of reactions on screen. You can hold your hand up; it will do certain things. But I like the fact that it's picking up on the video camera from different systems, not just FaceTime, and allowing you to make modifications to how the lighting. Well, you're doing it right now, aren't you, Alex?
I am doing it right now.
Physically I'm watching it change the lighting, but I like
Finally,
that.
a reason to be a video podcast.
That's it. I like the fact that that's actually in there in a really slick interface, because at that point you don't have to go fiddling around in settings. You don't have to try and worm your way back out to say like Google Hangout settings or Google Meet settings to do all these things. You can just do it from the taskbar. My only issue with this is now that we're pretty much all out of lockdown, and it has been a long time since I played online board games and Jackbox with the Kidman family. It doesn't feel as necessary as it once did, but I like the fact that it's there.
So what really surprises me about this, and it is a good feature, and to be honest, I had not tested it or played around with it till you mentioned it just then. But what really surprises me is these are the kind of features that you could get out of the really pricey studio display or using an iPhone as your webcam. They were kind of nice little add-on selling points. You wouldn't buy either just for that, unless you wanted the $2,000 webcam, I guess. I'm surprised Apple said, hey, look, we're doing this computationally anyway. Cool, just do it with any old webcam you've got. That's genuinely a nice value add. They've also added, though, and this kind of amused me, the ability to use any website like an app by adding it to your dock.
Oh, web apps return.
Well, it's basically throw a web page into your dock and it
Yeah.
opens it as a separate browser window. That's it.
It's a web view,
Yeah.
which ironically is one of the types of apps Apple is not a fan of approving on its App Store for a real sense of irony.
What they do seem to be keen on, though, is what they're calling game mode. This idea that you're going to be able to more directly access and kick your Mac into overdrive for all of these high-end games that are coming.
It's also that you can, and there's been a lot of talk about this ever since the betas turned up. The direct gaming porting system, or I think it's called. It's not called GPT, but it's something like that, where you'll be able to take what is effectively a Windows game and port it using some Rosetta-like framework to run on a Mac, and that's kind of exciting. I don't get the time to game. I wish I did, but a lot of the time, some of the games I want to play aren't available on Mac. They're not in development for it. I know Mac has a lot more games in development, and obviously there are some coming for iPhone because of the new processor as well. But there are games, especially old school games, that I want to play that I can't directly convert. I'd have to run Windows for, or a Windows emulation layer in something like Parallels or
Mm.
VMware, something like that. I don't want to do that. I like this idea because it actually potentially means that all of those old games I can finally play on a Mac.
But does the developer have to have ported it across, or can you just take anything that runs on Windows and do it?
So that's where it gets interesting. It doesn't look like the developer has to do it, at least based off the testing I've seen on Reddit. People have been able to apply the framework to games that already exist. Some people have gotten things like Mass Effect and I think a Windows version of Diablo running. I don't know. Someone else can tell me if Diablo of the latest version exists on Mac. I presume it doesn't. But basically, they have been able to get it running without the developer's knowledge as such. It's basically almost like take the execution, run some tools on it, and it works on your Mac.
But so run some tools, so it's not like anybody
It's
could just
not
pick
like
it up and
it's not like anyone can use it yet,
yeah.
but a starting point to have something that can do this out of the blue is kind of exciting.
Well, it's interesting. I still feel though that Apple kind of gets keen on this. Hey, we're into gaming now space. About every 5 years or
Yeah, you look
so,
at your
and
watch.
then
Yeah.
yeah, and then it falls by the wayside a bit. And also, this is only going to at best play catch up with Windows. We're
That's
not
true.
talking about, the next Grand Theft Auto coming to Mac first or anything like that. We are talking about existing Windows properties, perhaps running maybe as well, maybe not, and that really will be the killer thing. Whether or not the hardcore PC gaming crowd goes, wow, I can actually run this better on my MacBook than I can on my gaming PC. That'll be the day.
It'll be interesting to see what happens anyway. It's a really
Mm.
good test model. And if anything, even though, as you said before, it's not the sort of thing anyone can run, it's a really interesting message to send to developers that, hey, we've got this awesome framework that can do this, so you don't have to do as much. I mean, that's a lot of what sold people over to things like Unreal Engine and Unity before Unity went and gone messed everything up in the past week, because that now give them the ability to easily export to multiple platforms at once. Mac is typically not one of those platforms. So, sending that message to game developers is intriguing to me. As to whether they'll take it or not, I don't know. But, the fact that we're now seeing more game development, I guess more games embracing the iOS side of things, iOS and macOS aren't dramatically different from what I've learned about them in terms of what you build them for. So maybe.
Well, obviously, macOS Sonoma is out there now, and I'm guessing, Lee, that you are actually running it.
Well, if the podcast breaks right now, if
We
everything
know
goes
why.
belly
Yeah.
up, it's because I'm running Sonoma. Yeah.
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 Well, so am I. Adam, have you jumped on the Sonoma train?
No, and that's what I wanted to ask you guys. I never jump on day one anymore. Dude, there used to be the philosophy, at least in the Windows world, of wait until Service Pack 1. When a new version of Windows came out, you didn't touch it until they released the first major update for it when they fixed
Oh,
all the
the
bugs.
days of Windows XP and Service Pack 3.
Yes, exactly. but
Gosh,
the
we're old.
but the logic behind that was fairly sound, and I've always been like that with
If it ain't
iOS
broke, don't
updates.
update it.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
iOS updates and macOS updates, unless someone is specifically paying me to update it that day to figure out, write about it, I don't touch it because I don't feel like breaking my devices so I can help someone else find the bugs. Um, do people still do it like Mac OS? Even this one, I probably won't install it till the end of the year. I'll wait until Christmas because this is my work machine. I can't afford for them to break shit.
So I'll take this one first. And look, I
Mm,
think actually for our listenership, Adam's advice is sound.
totally.
Thank
If
you very
if
much.
if your system is working and you don't need the new features, you for
The
macOS,
exciting
I
new
will get
features.
onto why I think it's a little different on Windows when we talk about Windows. For macOS, yeah, you don't necessarily have to jump straight away. Um, I will say I think this has been more stable, and I do think macOS has been getting better. There was definitely a point at which, yeah, unless I was being paid, and typically I was, and as a tech journalist, you kind of have to jump into these
Yeah.
things sometimes.
Mm.
But unless that was the case, yeah, you jump in and you suddenly discover, oh god, my printer doesn't work, or that mouse doesn't work, or something's broken at a software level. I have seen some smaller scale reports of some issues with this from the final release candidate. Obviously, people running betas are running betas and they know what they're getting into, or they're foolish, or both. But there doesn't seem to have been any big large scale incompatibility. Lee, I think you've been running this for a bit longer than I have. Have you hit large scale problems?
No, not really. I found more problems with iOS beta than I did macOS betas in the past, and typically it could be because iOS is we just use it more. I mean, don't get me wrong, I use my Mac a lot, but I'm probably using whatever phone I'm using more often, and so I might just be able to find those things. For instance, during the iOS beta, I found the baby camera software we're using didn't work on a regular basis. I had to uninstall it. Same with Sonos; it would regularly crash. It's because it's a public beta, or I actually think I might have been running developer beta, so it was slightly ahead, and it wasn't ready. But as with Alex says, I'm seeing it. It's a lot more stable than it has
Mm.
been. I don't think I ran this macOS beta for very long, and I think largely for the same reason you said, Adam. It's my primary machine. If something breaks, it's a problem.
Yeah.
But it, I've not seen as major issues. iOS and iPad, there were a lot of issues this year, and I would have not recommended it to most people. I had made, the whole advice of not writing into the CMS directly. That became a problem for me of writing just into a standard notepad. I was losing files that weren't synchronizing. So it's sound advice in extreme in most situations. But if you're using things like Chrome or Safari and you're reliant on fairly basic apps, then yeah.
And I suppose the other thing I should hasten to add is backups. Backups are great. Do backups, have backups of your files. So if stuff does go awry, then you are reasonably covered. But we should flick over to the wild and wonderful world of Microsoft. And unlike Apple, where we have a nice, it's somewhere in California, and I've forgotten where it is, but Sonoma is another Californian landmark place, I'm pretty sure. The new Windows update that also landed on the 26th has a slightly less sexy name. This is Windows 11 version 22H2.
Oh, it's a beautiful part of the world. Have you ever
Oh,
been skiing
really,
there?
really?
Gorgeous.
Oh,
Absolutely
wow. Okay,
gorgeous.
fantastic, fantastic. And the big thing here, Adam, is Copilot, and Copilot is what's replacing Cortana, which sort of what replaced Clippy. This is
Oof.
your plastic AI pal who's fun to be with.
Well, that's what I don't kind of understand. That they talk about Copilot. Most of the talk I've heard about Copilot is adding it to Office tools, adding it to Word, adding it to Excel, adding it to, I don't know, Power BI or whatever to help you find out things. To help you extract more insight from something or create a document. But the way they're talking about Copilot in Windows is just like Cortana, is just like Siri. It'll let you launch apps, answer questions, access Windows settings. That's barely even AI. That's not really even coming
Well,
close to reaching the potential of it.
if it listens to you over a long period of time and starts adapting to
It's
and
gonna
guessing at
learn
time,
some
then
yeah,
it's AI, man.
it's gonna learn some choice language for a start.
Totally. Hey, Alexa, no.
Yeah.
So I took the plunge, and the other big difference here is this is released to the public, sort of, but you've got to be opted in to get the latest updates to get it. If you are not opted in, then you might not see this until I think it's November is when the stuff that's in this update becomes part of the standard patches that go through to all Windows 11 machines. But I took the plunge this week as a tech journalist and
And
played.
we no longer have Alex Kidman as a tech journalist. It's now Copilot speaking on his
This
behalf.
I am now run by Copilot. It is true. Beep. But it's interesting, and I think in some ways it feels a little bit bolder than what Apple's done with macOS. macOS is good. It works. It does what I need it to do. This does feel like they are starting to bridge that gap, and you're not entirely wrong, Adam, starting to bridge that gap between actually integrating full scale AI, because it does feed in to their investments in AI such that it'll do these classical things that we've been talking about AI doing for some time. It'll do text generation, it'll do image generation. It prompted me to say, oh, do you want me to write a song about the earth? And I'll put some of the lyrics actually up on the Vertical Hold webpage because they're, spoiler, awful. Um, but also do like image generation. And again, awful, but it was there, and I can see this being the bridge that gets that into consumers' hands, and not just the kind of tech enthusiast. And admittedly, a lot of the audience of this show are tech enthusiasts, but into that broader, grandma's got an AI now space. Lee, am I hopelessly optimistic about this?
No, I actually think what you're saying is exactly kind of what Microsoft is gearing it to be. Integrating it in a way that is more than just the chat GPT concept, so it actually does a little bit more than just simple text generation, is, I think, something that the world needs to understand looking into AI. There's a lot of concern about what AI can do. That's effectively what a lot of the Writers and Screen Actors Guild strikes are about, and that's understandable. The Writers Guild
Hmm.
strike has actually been resolved with AI protections in place, so there's an understandable fear, especially given that it can generate things. On the whole, there's a lot of cool things AI can do with your information, as you said,
Hmm.
being able to look at text you write or things that you receive or images and extract that information, or even just listening to you as it is right now, listening to Adam and trying to work out what he's thinking about right now. The answer is
I
Star
want
Trek.
peanuts.
It's Peanuts and Star Trek Enterprise. He's not quite sure how they connect, and I probably convinced how. No, it doesn't matter. But yeah, there's a lot of things it can do. If anyone's going to try to make it, I guess, more transparent and useful, it's Microsoft, because we haven't seen Apple really try much of it yet. We've got tons of neural cores in iOS and macOS, but it's largely there to do extra machine learning things for apps, not necessarily for the operating system yet. So it is interesting to see what this can do. My concern is it becomes like any feature of Windows that you just don't think about. Like, no one used Cortana. It was a smart assistant that wasn't that smart. No one really used it in the end. Clippy was the thing that we all want to burn. It theoretically was helpful, I guess, in the way that Jar Jar Binks was helpful at kickstarting the Star Wars franchise once again. But you want to set fire to both of them, so I, yeah.
I think the point of difference there, and this is something that I think Microsoft needs to work on, because if you do this Windows update, which I did, at first it's not in your face. You can just get on with Windows 11 as you have done in the past. And the balance there, I think, or part of the reason that people didn't use Cortana is it was also similarly kind of invisible. And part of the reason people didn't like Clippy was that it was really in your
Hmm.
face.
But what about
Getting that,
Microsoft Bob?
let us never mention Microsoft Bob again. Uh, Getting that balance right of how do you tell people, hey, there's this thing that can potentially help you do what you're trying to do without it becoming clippy like is really kind of difficult. There is, of course, another aspect here, though, especially in consumer land, because when businesses take up AI, they do so presumably knowing the risks, being
Mm,
aware of what's going on with their data, being acquiescing to that, or running their own in house instances in order to have control over this. What Microsoft is doing here, from a certain point of view, is saying, cool, well, we've got this AI, it can help you, but of course, we are feeding everything back into the engine. So every
yeah.
single time that you run a Copilot related search for something, or when I tell it to create an image of Paul McCartney jumping over the Grand Canyon on a rocket powered skateboard, and I'm putting that image up on the Vertical Hold website because it has to be seen to be disbelieved. But every single time it does that, it's getting more info, it's building more profiles. How invasive is this going to be? And are people aware of that, do you think?
I'd say no one's aware of that. I was on the radio a couple of weeks ago for something similar, where somebody was talking about, or just literally talking on in front of their phone about weed killer, and then Twitter started advertising them weed killer, and I said, yeah, that's the fun thing, is that with enough cookies and enough microphones, all of these things are listening to you, are ready to advertise to you, because that's how this works. I mean, you can
Hmm.
actually find your Amazon history and your Google history, and it will often contain things that you have not referenced either Alexa or Siri with. Don't wake up everything in the room when I say that. I'm just knowing
We're
full well
sorry,
that
listeners, you've just ordered a new TV.
Yeah.
absolutely. But it's a problem. You're right. Some businesses know it, a lot don't, and I have had to remind some businesses that I've spoken to about how you shouldn't use ChatGPT or other AI systems with confidential data, because it's all used for training. It is a similar situation to what is happening with Copilot. The question will be how critical it is. Um, I would probably turn it off until all of this is and if you're unsure, turn off until it's all been ironed out. Because if you're a student, for instance, working on a PhD, and you don't want your information to be out there as a form of training, you've literally got no guarantee of that. It's next to impossible, which is frustrating. It's a hard situation. As you said before, Alex, a lot of businesses may or may not be aware of this, but a lot of businesses use Windows, and if the upgrades rolled out, um, that could be business-related documents that are being scanned on a regular basis. It's a really weird situation to be in where AI is kind of imposed. You can turn it off, but if you're not aware of it, then it just might happen in the background.
One of the things that I'm worried about is that you can already see this on the web. You go to pages that were clearly either written by bots or written for bots because it's all about SEO and trying to impress Google, even though the way it reads is absolutely terrible.
That doesn't work either, by the way, as an
Yeah,
SEO.
but it
Unless
reads
you're trying to
terrible.
convince Google that there is no country in Africa starting with K.
Yes,
But we've talked about that before.
but it
That's
reads
true.
like it was written by someone who's kicked in the head.
Hmm.
Now, when these features start to get included into Office apps, then are we just going to be surrounded by this chat GPT style waffle every time you open a business document, every time you open a report, every time you receive or consume any kind um of written material or just material in general? It's going to be this AI generated crap.
At the risk of offending any managers or anyone in the managerial position listening to the show, don't you get that sort of crap already?
I was
That's
going to
why I
say
work for
probably
myself, so
20%.
I don't
Yeah,
have to.
20% of the PR pitches I get are
Yeah.
like
Oh
that.
yeah.
And to be
That's
fair,
being generous,
to
saying only 20%.
well, I was going to
True.
say to be fair to the PR community, there's a lot that don't, and these are generally from really weird companies that have grabbed my details because I've been to like a CES and
Mm.
they're predominantly US based, for example. But
Yeah, yeah,
it's already happening. I mean, it's already out there.
yeah. And
This is a done deal.
I with the SEO side of things, and I know you, as you said, you're going to see that in a lot of web pages. You're going to see it in scams as well. That to me is the really critical area to see scammers actually have the AI tools available to them so readily to improve their scams. That's really interesting because that waffle starts to become really pervasive for a lot of people, and I think that's a real risk. But for a lot of documents, yeah, you're going to find that sort of crap, but the good quality stuff will shine, and that's also the same argument for the SEO side of stuff, which is that Google looks for you adding something to it. One of the
Yeah.
downsides of AI is that it's a really good way of taking information from lots of different places at once, blending it together, and rewriting it in a way that, as you said, kind of sounds like you've been kicked in the head. Sometimes works. ChatGPT 4 is better than 3.5, but most people are using 3.5, and that's your version right there. You've got to pay for the other one. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're adding anything to it. So when you're reading these terrible documents or reading these terrible websites, look for the one that adds something to the equation because that's the one that probably has had some writing in it themselves.
Now, Adam, you mentioned that you're probably not going to upgrade to macOS till the end of the year, but this does bring up the other point I was going to get to, which is that on the Windows side of the fence, and broadly speaking, I don't
Mm.
want to dissuade people from generally running updates, especially security updates, because that is important.
Oh, yeah, that's different. Security updates is very
But
different to operating
yeah,
system updates.
but the way Microsoft runs Windows these days, basically, you sort of don't end up with a choice. You will wake up one day, you will power up your computer, and you will discover that overnight it has patched itself. I think the timeline for this is it's the October optional preview update, and then all users as of November. So
Hmm.
by the end of the year, everyone on a Windows 11 machine will presumably either have Copilot or have to have had disabled it. However, that's feasible. I
Like the
will
way
admit
they
I've not looked into it.
foisted Windows 10 onto everybody and basically tricked the holdouts into installing it.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Classy.
Mm. You can just use a Mac. I mean, there's Sonoma on that.
The solution, gentlemen, is obvious. We need to return to the days of the Amiga.
Oof. I thought you
Kickstart
were going to
just for
say it's the
everyone.
year of Linux on the desktop.
I don't know.
So,
Sorry.
question without, I think I just broke
I
Leigh.
just accidentally
So
Okay, cool.
here's a question without notice. And this is something I've been using, well, Macs on and off for decades, but for work for about the last 15 years and Windows interspersed between that. And I've found that, at least with a notebook, every time you buy a notebook, once you upgrade to the next operating system, it never runs as smoothly again. I've found that with MacBooks. I found it with Windows. I haven't noticed it yet. I've got a MacBook Pro running with an M1 Pro chip in it that's now on its second operating system, but that thing's got so much grunt under the bonnet.
Mm.
But do you still think that are we still seeing that problem where once you get away from the operating system that came installed on it out of the box, it's never going to be the same?
I haven't seen it as much with Macs, but most reviewers have been rocking M silicon for a couple years now,
Yeah.
and as you said, the M1 is still such. Even the M1 in the standard MacBook Air is such an impressive little beast that I'm still shocked it outclasses quite a few Windows PCs released today. So I think Apple's kind of worked that thing to the point where it'll keep going. It's the Energizer Bunny of chips. Windows, I don't know. Intel updates and AMD updates aside, I usually find it's the drivers that break things, not
Mm.
necessarily Windows itself. So live in hope, I guess. I don't know.
My observation on that, I mean, I would mirror what you're saying on the Mac side of things. I think on the Windows side of things, that used to be the case, Adam. I think definitely there was a point where you go, yeah, look, stick with the version of Windows that it came
Yeah.
with. I am going to say since Windows 10, and because they had that rolling iterative model there, I think they actually ironed out a lot of the problems with that, such that if you were still on the standard spec for that operating system for 10, for 11, I generally find I get about the same experience with an update. But then let's face it, we are long past. I mean, Windows 11 was a bit of a surprise as it was. We are long past that time where it was like, oh, it's been 2 years, right? There's going to be another version of Windows. There's going to be a launch event and a new boxed copy. No, it's just these. It is these little, what is it? 22H2 is this
I
major upgrade, which as again really just doesn't sound all that attractive, but it's practical and it's functional to say, yeah, this is a point upgrade in a lot of ways.
I just wish they would do. I don't wish companies would be the same, but I really wish Microsoft would just say, "Okay, it's no longer Windows 11. Call it Windows 12." Just do what Apple does and just call it a different thing. It's a different product. You're adding so many new features. Get call it something else. It's fine. We get it, but they don't. I don't know why.
Well, that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Leigh for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
And you're a long-time guest of the show. You know what comes now. It's not the 3 questions of doom. You just get some time to spruik what you do, how you do it, and if you must, your favourite lasagna recipe.
Oh, cool. I'm Leigh Stark. You can find me on X/Twitter under Lilo, and I run website pickr.com.au, Pickr. My favorite lasagna recipe is to make bechamel. Just use ricotta, a light ricotta as your bechamel. It's much faster, but do it in the shape of Star Trek Enterprise, the Captain
Oh
Archer
my
era,
God.
specifically so you can somehow piss off the Vertical Hold team in their final wrap up of the show. Do it every time and take a picture and send it to Vertical Hold.
And while you're not doing that, Leigh, any work that you've done recently, articles or apps that you might want to promote?
If anyone wants to download or play with my app, Simple Saver, which is a budget app on iPhone, please do tell me what you think. I am building it for Android because I've got to learn how to develop for that language as well.
Sounds like a plan. And as always, you can catch us at the Vertical Hold webpage on Facebook, Instagram, or you can look up Adam or me on Mastodon, Blue Sky, or Threads, and yeah, X and Twitter still exist for now.
Yep.
Thanks everyone for dropping by, and drop us a line. Let us know what you think about the latest version of macOS, the latest version of Windows, or just tech in general. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Uniden Australia.